about
Good
that.
morning, yeah.
All right, let's talk about the debate and possibly a vote that's set for the Israel Security Assistance Support Act. What is this legislation and do you support it?
Oh, I very much support it, and essentially it says the president do what the Congress asked you to do and what you asked the Congress to provide. Remember, it was President Biden who asked for arms and munitions for Israel. Congress provided that, and now he's withholding it. And these are precision munitions that are needed to better target, to minimize civilian casualties against an enemy that uses civilians as a shield.
So these are the details from this legislation. Prohibits administration from withholding military aid to Israel passed by Congress and require the prompt delivery of any aid. Any weapons currently being withheld would have to be shipped within 15 days. The bill would restrict funds for the Pentagon and State Department, including the salaries of individual officials, until agencies comply. This is all in response to what the president said, that if Israel goes into Rafah, that the president would then pause some weapons.
Israel has to go into Rafah because that's where Hamas is. And as someone said the other day, you can't put out 80% of a fire. The killing stops the moment that Hamas surrenders, and the sooner that day comes, the better. And the more of a force that Israel can apply against Hamas, the sooner that day is going to come. President
Biden has said that the munitions being supplied by the United States are killing women and children.
Well, civilian casualties are a terrible price for war. And that's why when it is forced upon you, you have a responsibility to get it over with as quickly as possible, and you do that by applying all the force that you possibly can. You know, when we were attacked on December 7th of 1941, Franklin Roosevelt came to Congress the next morning to ask for a declaration of war against Japan, and he pledged to all of the resources of the country and to win through, in his words, to absolute victory. Now, on October 7th, Hamas attacked not a military force, but specifically targeted innocent and unarmed women and children. Israel has a moral responsibility to its people. Frankly, it has a moral responsibility to humanity to wage war against Hamas until its unconditional surrender, and to bring all of the force that it possibly can toward doing that as quickly as possible. The United States has voted to support Israel in this effort, and the president is now obstructing it.
7,000 were killed on October 7th. There have been nearly 40,000 killed in Gaza. According to reports...
That's a Hamas figure. I believe the UN just revised that down by about half, did it not?
Okay.
Which means the UN does not trust those figures. So, Greta, I'd warn you not to trust them either.
Okay, so, but the percentage of women and children killed, of those that have been killed in Gaza, how do you address that? Should it be weapons supplied by the United States, or should it have Israel have its own weapons?
As I said, the sooner Israel wins this, the sooner Hamas unconditionally surrenders, the sooner the killing stops. Again, that is, Hamas not only targeted civilians, it uses its own civilians as shields. That's the evil that we're up against, and that is the evil that has to be eradicated. In a war, you don't want proportional responses. Proportional responses mean that war goes on forever. You want to muster the most disproportional response that you possibly can, and bring all of your might and fury to that fight and get it over with as quickly as possible. That's what Israel's trying to do. That is what Congress intended when it voted that aid, and that's what President Biden is deliberately obstructing.
Did you support aid for Ukraine?
Yes.
Okay, and so explain your votes there.
Oh, it's not altogether complicated. History warns us what happens when aggression, whether it's Hamas against Israel or Russia against Ukraine, goes unchecked. The things can, particularly in an unstable environment, can spin very quickly out of control. Churchill was absolutely convinced that if Hitler had been stopped in his first aggression, World War II would never have happened. And that's a lesson that we need to heed, and that's what the Ukrainian aid is all about. I am not unsympathetic to those who say this is money we don't have. Profligate spending is hollowing out our treasury and affecting and undermining our own nation's defense. That's all true. But as Reagan said, defense is not a budget issue. You spend what you need to spend in order to defend your country. And although the defense of Ukraine and Israel is one step removed from ours, I'd argue that's a very good thing, and we ought to see if we can't keep it that way.
We're talking with Congressman Tom McClintock, Republican of California, this morning. We'll take your comments and questions as well about the Israel-Hamas war. Ruben in Philadelphia, let's start with you. Democratic caller. Go ahead.
Yes, how you doing today, sir? I experienced the move bombing back in 1985, and they went in there just to get rid of one compound, a house, but they ended up destroying the whole neighborhood. Now, how are you going to just go in there and bomb Hamas and don't think you're going to wipe out the rest of the civilians that are there? You've already killed enough. Isn't that bad enough? And isn't it true that one of the generals from the IDF just resigned because they knew a year ahead of time that they were building tunnels and Hamas was going to attack Israel? And why didn't they do something then?
Well, I don't know about the IDF official, but I will say civilian casualties are a terrible, awful consequence of war. War is hell on earth. But it is inevitable whenever you look at the number of civilian casualties during World War II. Would somebody have suggested that we need to leave Hitler in power because look at all the civilian casualties? No, the most humane thing to do is get the war over with as quickly as possible, and that means the most disproportionate response that you can muster, and that means the unconditional surrender of Hamas. This all ends the moment Hamas surrenders. Hamas started this, and it needs to answer for its crimes against humanity.
Here's from NPR reporting. The United Nations says it revised down its tally of women and children killed over the past 7 months in Gaza as the health ministry in the territory confirms most but not all the identities of the casualties. Despite its revision based on identified deaths, the UN maintains that the Gaza Health Ministry's overall death toll of more than 35,000 people killed in the ongoing Israel military offensive in Gaza is reliable. Here's a closer look at the figure. The UN humanitarian agency, citing Gaza's health ministry, says 7,797 children and 4,959 women were killed in Gaza as of April 30th. Those figures, however, only account for 70% of deaths fully identified.
Right.
Any further thoughts on that?
Well, what I've already said, and that is that civilian casualties are a terrible consequence of war, and that's why you want to get that over with as quickly as possible. And the only way to do that is for Hamas to surrender.
James in Rome, Georgia. Democratic caller, will go to you. Hi, James.
Yes. Representative, what you are talking about makes no sense. Biden is the president. You people act like you got more loyalty to Israel than you do to the United States. You will not raise the minimum wage here. You will not give health care. Abortion is legal in Israel. Also, marijuana and drugs is legal. Why do you have so much loyalty to Israel and you hate this country so much? You hate black people so much.
Well, wow. James, what evidence do you have of that?
Really?
What?
James, listen to yourself.
I'm listening to you, what you are talking, man. You hate the United States. You have loyalty to Israel. You will not do anything for the United States.
James, what did he say? What did he say? What did the congressman say? That you believe what you believe.
Than what Biden is doing. But Trump, they say he want to be a dictator and do anything. Greta, please let me finish my thought. That's all I'm saying. Please let me finish. And what I'm trying to say is is your loyalty to Israel or to the United States? It's a lot of you got in your Democratic, your Republican Party. You only have two Jewish people in it. You don't support Israel or Jews.
Okay.
This is all political.
All right. Well,
that's the kind of sickness that we have in our society. In the past, it's been limited to the lunatic fringe. You now see that sense of anti-Semitism growing on the left, seeping not only into our college campuses and onto our streets, but also into the halls of Congress. This is something that we all have to condemn, this anti-Semitism that we see on the left today.
Donald, Kalamazoo, Michigan, Republican.
Yeah, I just surprised I got through, so I'm not really prepared. But that's awful strange to hear these Democrats complain about the civilian casualties. It was Truman was president when he dropped the atomic bomb on Japan twice. He was also president when they firebombed the civilians in Germany. on purpose. Not these weren't accidents. These were done on purpose. They killed civilians, women, children, goldfish, cats, birds, everything that breathes in those areas was dead. And now they're complaining about what's going on in over in Israel.
And
that's it.
That's what ended the war and ended the killing. I wouldn't be here today if Truman had not dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because my father was in the 88th Infantry Division in Italy. They'd already been informed. They were the first wave of assault on the Japanese mainland. He probably would not have come back. Tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of American soldiers would not have come back, not to mention the deaths of Japanese soldiers and Japanese civilians in that attack. That's why I keep saying we have got to get this over with as quickly as possible, and the only way to do so is to apply the maximum force for Hamas to surrender. These half measures only prolong the suffering and prolong the deaths. And this business of sending billions of dollars of aid to Gaza while the war is still going on, again, is going to end up in the hands of Hamas. Hamas controls that territory, and that is going to further prolong the war. Humanitarian aid needs to be provided the moment the war ends, but not a second before.
Joseph, Tallahassee, Florida, Republican?
Yes, ma'am.
We're listening. Question or comment?
Yes. The question I had was not so much a question, but a comment in regards to the Mr. McClintock. I agree with him, having been in the service, and I have seen what happens with guerrilla fighters, and that's what Hamas really is. Now, I also feel at the same time that the real problem is Iran, because even if they take out Hamas, there's going to be another group started up with another name to make it look like it stands for something. So we got to take out Iran like we did with Iraq, and that'll stop the terrorism.
And Joseph, when you say we, you're saying the United States needs to.
The United States should, because we're saying we're going to support our people, and we showed support. But then again, we act like now, oh, well, Joe Biden's afraid to do this and afraid to do that. It's a double standard. None of our other allies are going to trust us after a while.
Okay.
If they needed to depend upon us, they're going to want to control everything.
Congressman.
Well, first of all, I don't believe that we should attack another country unless it attacks us. We should provide arms and munitions where we can to support countries that are being attacked, particularly democracies that are being attacked. But I think that the war powers of Congress should be reserved for a response to an attack against our country. However, with respect to Iran, I think there's a much simpler way to do it. There is a huge resistance movement in Iran, and it's been growing under the Iranian oppression all of these years. I've got a very large Iranian expatriate community in my district who keeps me well informed of the conditions and situations in Iran. Several times in the last decade, that resistance was about to boil over into an overthrow of that government when the United States stepped in and essentially backed the government. You remember the pallets, literally cargo pallets of cash that the Obama administration sent the mullahs a few years ago. The Iranians report to me that much of that money went into increased oppression within that country, which again increases the resentments of the people of that country. We should be doing everything we can not to fund the mullahs, but rather to fund the Iranian resistance and have them bring down that government from within. That government has been very clear its intention to acquire nuclear weapons, and once acquired, to use them. Iran is going to be dealt with only one of two ways. Either it's going to be a terrible bloody war, or it's going to be the internal collapse of that country. I think we should be doing everything we can to hasten its internal collapse.
New York Post headline, House Republican files articles of impeachment against Biden over Israel aid cutoff threat. Do you agree with that?
We've been through this before, Greta, with Mayorkas. The Constitution is very clear that the power of impeachment is reserved for treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. In other words, it has to be a crime, and it has to be related to that office. That's the high in high crimes. I opposed the sham impeachments of Trump because they were not impeachable offenses. I opposed the impeachment of Mayorkas for exactly the same reason, and I would oppose the impeachment of Biden on those grounds. If the president is acting within his constitutional authority, no matter how bad his decisions are, it is not an impeachable offense, and we know that, because the Constitutional Convention specifically considered maladministration, that is, doing a really bad job, as a grounds for impeachment, and rejected it. They did not want impeachment to be used to settle policy differences between the legislative and the executive branches. And unfortunately, that's what it is now becoming.
And what do you think will happen with the investigation done by your colleagues, House Oversight Committee, Judiciary Committee, into President Biden and his son? Where is that headed?
I have no idea at this point. I think their responsibility is to lay out the facts to the American people and let the American people decide that question at the ballot box. I think we're far too close to an election to initiate an impeachment against the president. I know that's what the Democrats did to Trump, but we should not let them become our teachers.
We'll go to April, Springfield, Virginia, Democratic caller. Hi, April.
Hi, Representative. I want to thank you for sharing your story about how you may not exist. You may not have come into existence had a decisive action not been taken. And I say that because I also need you to understand that for how grateful you are for your life, there were tens of thousands of lives not realized because of the bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And I think that also needs to be thought of in terms of the situation happening between Hamas and Israel. Palestinians are not just a byproduct of war, like you were saying, that there's going to be this, yes, you used an appropriate word in saying that it is a terrible, side effect. I forgot the word you used. But like they shouldn't be. So my question for you is, what decisive, immediate action could be taken? And I don't want to hear Hamas. I do not want to hear the name Hamas, because let's be very clear. Hamas did start by building hospitals and schools for the people of Palestine and Gaza when Israel put fences around them and put them in the largest open-air prison in the world. So what decisive action could be taken by the United States, the big brother of Israel? We are their big brother, whether we like it or not. You like it, I don't. And that's a fine distinction to make. That's not an insult. That's not a bad thing. We just have different opinions, and that's okay. What decisive action could be taken by the United States right now to end the destruction of an entirety of people? Like you said, you are here because a war was ended. I don't like how that war was ended. I don't like the use of nuclear weapons.
Well, so let me just stop you right there for a second. So you would not have dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. You would have allowed World War II to grind on into 1946, 1947, with the millions of Japanese and American casualties that would have produced. I find that rather shocking.
Okay. Sure, sir, why are my country people more important than the Japanese country people? We're all human
You forget
beings.
the millions of Japanese that would have died in an American invasion of Japan.
Right, and America didn't have to invade Japan.
Of course it did. Japan had attacked us. Somebody pointed out recently you can't put out 80% of a fire. You've got to put out the entire fire. And when you ask,
an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. We can't just keep retaliating and fighting and fighting. At some point, someone gets to be the peacemaker, and we are the most powerful nation in this world. It amazes me that we can't be peacemakers.
Okay,
with all due respect, April, that is the most naive analysis I've heard in a very, very long time. You cannot discuss this issue without discussing Hamas, because it was Hamas that has pledged genocide against the people of Israel. They've made it very clear if they have the ability to wipe out Israel, they will. That is the entire message behind From the River to the Sea. Israel could do. Israel has
been
that
committing
power, but has
genocide.
not used it against Hamas. The people of Gaza were given self-determination by Israel in 2007. They elected Hamas. According to all of the polling that I have seen, Hamas
Okay, April,
continues.
1 second. Let the congressman
Hamas
finish.
continues to have the support of the people of Gaza. And look at what they have created with that. Terrible conditions. That should be a Mediterranean resort destination, not what it has become. And it has become not because of anything that Israel has done to Hamas, it's because of what Hamas has done to Gaza. When they export their terrorism beyond those boundaries, the countries it attacks have a right and a responsibility to engage, and that's what Israel has done. And
All right.
this did not start except for Hamas, and it will not end until Hamas has been eradicated.
To answer her question, what decisive action can the United States take?
What we just did. Provide the precision munitions that Israel needs to bring this war to a close as quickly as possible with the unconditional surrender of Hamas. We've already done that. It's now being blocked by the President of the United States, and that's what the resolution today is all about.
We'll go on to John, who's in Charleston, South Carolina. Independent, your turn for the congressman.
Hey, I was calling in to say from like one white guy to another white guy that when Black people talk about and when they're passionate about like discrimination, maybe just listen, instead of just saying, oh, really, and diminishing it. But you said something about we had to drop a nuke. How are all the other wars ended when they didn't have nukes?
With overwhelming force. With overwhelming force. That's the way you win a war. And the more force you can bring to a war, the faster it's over. That's why after the attack,
military supremacy without nukes. Then you're saying that America didn't have the military.
Where are you getting that from?
Wrong.
All right, so John, let's have the congressman respond.
I'm saying that was the most effective means that we had at our disposal at that moment to bring that war to a close, and it did. And that saved millions of Japanese lives and American lives, which would have been lost if that war had continued on into Japan.
We'll go to Aurora, Colorado. Frank, Republican. Hi, Frank.
Good morning. I'm calling in because this whole argument about the Japanese dropping the nuke on the Japanese were already in surrender talks before the nukes were dropped. You can go back and read the comments about why they wanted to drop the first nuke. They wanted to see what would happen if they hit a civilian population with it. Also,
that's just bad history.
Can you let Frank finish and then I'll have you?
Yeah. Say
you
again?
can look at Korea and what Kissinger did, and you can see that overwhelming force did not work. I mean, we're still have that war active.
All right, Frank, did you hear him, Congressman?
I did, and that's just bad history on so many different fronts. With respect to Korea, MacArthur was very, very clear on that we did not bring our force to bear to win that war. When he came to the U.S. Congress, he said that in war there is no substitute for victory. That is true then, it's true now. And that's ultimately what this entire debate is about.
I want to share one last text with you from a viewer. CNN says Republicans are going to hold Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress today. Do you support this?
I believe I do. We still have the hearing to go through today, but yes, I believe that he has been entirely unresponsive to subpoenas that were issued legitimately by the Congress.
You want to hear more during this hearing today?
Yeah.
Here's this CNN headline: Biden asserts executive privilege over the Her audio files ahead of the House contempt proceedings against Garland. Your reaction to that?
Well, that's an interesting legal question. Can he assert executive privilege over a criminal investigation? That's not a discussion over policy. It's a criminal investigation by the FBI. Interesting question that I don't know the answer to it.
What do you think happens then if he's held in contempt of Congress? What's next?
Nothing, because Congress cannot prosecute a contempt citation. That has to be done by Merrick Garland. That's a flaw in our system I don't think we've ever quite been able to address. It's better than all the alternatives that we've looked at over the years.
This contempt of Congress will take place before two committees. There's the Oversight Committee, Judiciary Committee. People can go to our website, cspan.org, for details of our coverage there. Denise in Pittsburgh, California, Democratic caller.
Hi. I'm just so very glad that us up here in Northern California are not represented by you, because if you think what's going on in Israel is okay, then that's evil and that's wicked, and that is not of the Lord. Netanyahu has overkilled people over there. It's not necessary what he's doing. That's genocide going on, and you go along with it and you support that evil, perverted president that you had, Trump.
Okay, Denise.
Genocide is the wiping out of a people. That is what Hamas is pledged to do against Israel. Israel is not pledged to do that against the Palestinians, but when Hamas, the government of the Palestinians in Gaza, attacks them, I think they have every right and reason to respond and to eliminate that threat, and that's only done through a bloody war that ends with the surrender of Hamas. And the sooner Hamas surrenders, the sooner that bloody war is over.
Congressman Tom McClintock, Republican.